We are on that one. Let's see if we're coming out under the right channel. 50-50. I don't think it's going to work. I think we're going to pop up somewhere else. And I think that's going to be the missing link on this. So, for those of you that are watching on probably Twitch or whatever, yeah, you're going to have some fun. I don't know where we're going live, but let's go find it out here. So this is the fun part of not having done this for several months. You forget all the little steps. Okay, there we are. I see where we are live, but it's under our channel, but not the links or anything, and that's what I was worried about. So we'll get over here. We'll give people the links, and then we'll go from there, and we'll get this straightened out. This is the fun that we have. There we go. And of course, now everybody's trying to help me. Thank you. Where were all you guys when I needed you earlier? You're sending messages now. That's okay.
They knew. They knew. They were watching you squirm.
Yeah. This is what it is. So I'll have someone. Yeah. So okay. So. Deep breaths. First Sunday, and this is funny, Greg. So, welcome, Greg, first of all, to the Awesemo family. I believe you've been on a couple other shows. This is the first one you've been on with an amazing producer such as myself, who's also trying to host the show.
It's a different experience. It's a different experience.
What a kind way of saying things, Greg. What a kind way of saying things. So here we are. So most of you that are regulars know me, technology, never the twain shall meet. It gets to be a little tricky here and there. And it's like they've gone through some upgrades on YouTube and Restream and a few things since I last dusted this off over 120 days ago. And I've just been doing podcasts. So that's a little easier and I can control that. But here we are. We are live. We will let everybody start to collect in here. Not to worry, guys. We will get you the information. Now, today's slate, much like yesterday's slate, the sites are getting their bearings. FanDuel, who for the last 3 or 4 years claimed that their users didn't want those 3 o'clock games or later, which was usually Texas and Colorado, they've reached all the way up to the 4 o'clock games today. So they have a 13-game main slate, which is like never in the recent history of FanDuel have they done that. DraftKings is going up through the 2 o'clock games, so they have 11. So we're going to focus mostly on those 11, and then wherever we get to, we'll still, if we're after lock, we'll wrap up the afternoon games because there are a couple games at 4 o'clock as well as a 7 o'clock and I think a 9 o'clock or a 10 o'clock if I'm remembering correctly. Sunday seems to be about the only thing that's going to be normal with the baseball schedule going forward. Yesterday for Saturday, we got caught a little off guard because there was a bolus of games at 1 and 2 o'clock and then a whole bunch at 4, but the site said normally they would have gone with 4 as their main slate. They're like, no, we're going to do 1. It's like, but you guys never do it that way. So we're catching up. Everybody's getting their bearings. Maybe Shohei Ohtani will count for a pitcher, or is today he going to be a hitter only? I don't know. But,
I gotta say those YouTube upgrades didn't feel like upgrades to me, but we're figuring it out.
Yeah. So in any event, here we are, gamers. Much appreciated, and we'll get these kinks worked out. Hat tip to Josh Engelman, who helped me out behind the scenes this morning getting this set up, and Nolan Kelly, he does a lot of this stuff. I was trying to be self-sufficient and produce today because we try to give a few people Sundays off here at Awesemo. So that's where we are. So want to mention, and I'll don't worry, I know Tom's watching. Tom, I'll get the little sponsor logo up here shortly. But today we are sponsored by SuperDraft, so we'll talk about them. They're going with the all-day slate every game, as is Yahoo. So the fun thing about SuperDraft, if you have not yet signed up, or if you've signed up and have not yet made a deposit, if you use the promo code Awesemo10, that's Awesemo10, with your first deposit of $10, they will match it. Or if with that first deposit you put in $100 and use the promo code Awesemo10, again, 10, they will give you $20. That comes in super cash, and that is their site currency. It's available for immediate use into any contest. So you definitely want to check that out. And then they have very flexible rosters. You have 2 pitchers, and then I think it's 6 hitters, and there's no positions. There's no salary. Well, how do they do it with no salary, EMac? Well, very easily. They have what is called the multiplier. So your usual scoring types are in play. They take a little bit of DraftKings, a little bit of FanDuel, put their hands together, and then they put a multiplier on it. So if you're looking for some of the rookies or newer guys, you're going to find them way down on the list because they're going to have a 2 or higher multiplier. They take their fantasy points, multiply it by 2. So the other day, Justin Verlander, established ace, Cy Young Award winner, he had a multiplier of 1, whereas Ross Stripling had a multiplier of 2. Stripling outscored him because the 2 times multiplier on fantasy points. So it's a unique way to go, and their contests generally don't fill all the way up. So while not always rake free, there's a little bit of room. But that's where we are. So at superdraft.io. All right, Greg, let me get my bearings here. But hey, they're here to hear some analysis here from you. So let's kind of look here. I don't believe we have any weather issues that should be overly concerning. If anything, there may be a random scattered shower or something here or there, but it looks like hot and humid, but nothing's really popping. Let's start off with our first game, and I'm going to turn you loose. We'll go game by game. We've got Robert Duggar, who is taking the bump here for Miami in Philadelphia. We have low 90s for the temperature right now, 50% humidity. No real wind to worry about. On the other side, you have Vince Velazquez, who is nicely priced on DraftKings at 6,900. But the problem is, if he makes it to the third time through the order, implosions are on the horizon. What do you like from our first game, Greg?
I think one thing we really have to look at with Vince Velazquez is that he is a high strikeout pitcher. He's shown upside in the past. The issue is just there's no consistency there with Velazquez. And like you said, he's prone to blow up at any point in time. But one thing that I think kind of makes him somebody who I want to roster in GPPs and I'm going to have exposure to is there just aren't SP2s on DraftKings that I'm all that comfortable in. So he's one guy in a plus matchup against the Marlins. He has strikeout upside that I feel is a good guy to go to just because I think he's the pitcher with the most upside that's priced under 7,000. I don't know if there's anybody that stands out to you that you look at as like, oh, this is a guy who could, strike out 8 hitters or something like that for a cheap price. But to me, there's a lot of expensive pitchers that are in good spots, not that many cheap pitchers. And Velazquez against the Marlins is one guy that I look at and go, he has upside. He also has downside too, because we've seen him get blown up in the past, but that upside's worth chasing in tournaments.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned, the upside, we will with 30 people on the expanded rosters right now. We may see him just go 2 times through the order. We've seen a lot of pitchers that are kind of the aces, go 4 innings and change. They've gone, anywhere, some of them between upper 60s to low 80s for pitches. And hey, they're going to make about 12 starts this year. No need to push people now. Yes, it is the middle of summer, but these guys got ramped up, ready to go. COVID hit with all of the suppression of sports, and then they've just sat for a couple months. Now we had a short summer camp / spring training, and where are these guys? We don't know for sure. So we're going to see a lot of variance. We've got bullpen arms available in abundance. That doesn't mean they're better or worse than the guys on the mound, but it means there are plenty of options that managers can go to. And we've already seen multiple pitchers scratched. Strasburg got scratched yesterday. We've had, I think, 2 scratched already today. We've seen teams maybe not call the people openers, but some of these swingmen or other bullpen guys are starting the games. They're listed as a starter. You think they're going to be okay. And then they go 50 pitches. So this is just, we're kind of all over the place. This is the kind of strategy where lower your buy-in entry fee levels, spread out your player pool, and hope one of your lineups breaks free is definitely one way to do that. But I do think that, as you mentioned, Velasquez definitely on the short list for this price point, in the hopes that we get 60, 70 pitches from him 2 times through the order, gives up a couple runs, gets a few strikeouts, gets us through safely. That's what we're hoping for pitchers at this point.
I'll add in that even though he's at a similar price point on FanDuel, I don't think we need to go there for FanDuel. It's just SP2 on DraftKings, especially because there are high-priced offenses in good spots. There are expensive pitchers I like, and it's just looking for that cheap pitcher that I think is upside, and there's not many guys that stand out other than Velazquez.
All right, let's see. We'll go on to our next game here. And again, apologies coming out on the wrong stream there. Everyone, we'll get that worked out. We're live. We have sound, we have video. That's a huge upgrade from where I was this morning.
It's opening weekend for us too.
Yeah. We are not casting stones. Everybody hits these little bumps. We're good with it. We're good with it. And hey, if you can't make some technology jokes at my expense, what is the point of ever making jokes? Okay, on to our next game here. We have the Yankees and we have the Washington Nationals. As I mentioned yesterday, Steven Strasburg was scratched. We should be good to go with Patrick Corbin here. Tough matchup against the Yankees. Of course, they're going to come very right-handed heavy. Looks like their lineup only has number 9 hitter Mike Tauchman. That is coming in as a lefty. Everybody else is a righty, and we already know the bona fides of Aaron Judge, Gleyber Torres, Giancarlo Stanton, Ursula, Andujar. DJ LeMahieu, who's gotten a couple days off already, so who knows what's going on there. But yikes, that is a tough matchup there. We saw that what Scherzer did, gave up a few runs, but he also had double-digit strikeouts. Now, Corbin, not exactly a double-digit strikeout guy, but 6 innings is feasible for him. Gets a few ground balls, gets some strikeouts. We're in a good spot. Still for 10,400, this is a risky matchup to allocate that much of our capital into this. But FanDuel, you've got some super cheap hitters in the top 4 of the orders, sub 3K. And what we need on FanDuel is someone that's probably going to go 6 innings, because then you can get the quality start. That's huge. Corbin is one of those guys. On the other side, who knows what the Yankees are going to do. This is probably more of a bullpen game for them, or 3, I say bullpen. 3 or 4 guys are probably going to pitch today for the Yankees. Do you like hitters? What do you want to do with Corbin here? This is all you.
Yeah, this isn't a game I have all that much interest in. In terms of Corbin, if this was a shorter slate where we didn't have so many options, then maybe I'd be interested in him. But for this, no, the Yankees have one of the best offenses in baseball. They should crush left-handed pitching this year as long as they're healthy. And then from the Nationals side of the game, Velazquez is only expected to throw 40 to 50 pitches. Then the Yankees are going to get into their bullpen. They have one of the best bullpens in baseball. So it's hard for me to project all that much production from the National side of the game. And just with all the other options on this slate, I'm fine staying with both sides of this game. No interest in Corbin, no interest in either of the offenses. If I had to pick one off, Giancarlo Stanton isn't all that expensive. He's finally healthy because it's the start of the season. He's hit the ball really well to open the year. So I think he's not an awful one-off, somebody with home run upside, but not a game that I think we need to target.
Thanks. Well, we've got a bunch. As I mentioned, DraftKings going with 11, FanDuel with 13, Yahoo and SuperDraft going with all 15 today. Let's come on to our next one here. Now I got a lot of interest. So we've got Blake Snell going against the Toronto Blue Jays. Adam and I talked a little bit about this yesterday, where, yes, the Blue Jays have a lot of young talent. They have a lot of good hitters, but they all have, their average hitter in the lineup today probably has about 2 seasons under their belt. Maybe 2 seasons and change. So while individually they're good, collectively, hard for them to all have good games at the same time, because they're still getting their experience, they're getting their reps in, etc. So it looks like we might be playing with a little bit of fire, but as we saw last year, we're really not. If you're giving up a couple solo shots, totally fine with that, as long as there's not runners on base. Blake Snell, phenomenal pitcher here. He is the guy I definitely want to target. I feel good about him getting at least to the 6th inning. Fingers crossed, maybe through the 6th inning. Not planning on much more than that. But this matchup against the Blue Jays with Danny Jansen, Brandon Drury, and Anthony Alford at the bottom of the lineup, not going to scare anybody here. So what do you want to do with the Snellevator, as Lofty likes to call?
All right. Well, I have some bad news for you, because a report just came out this morning that he's only expected to pitch 2 to 4 innings now today.
Well, cross him off.
Yeah. So he was somebody who actually, amongst the high-end pitchers, he was the guy who was my favorite until that news came out. And now because of that, we just can't really consider him. One thing that does make it a little interesting now is that this now sets up as a bullpen game for the Rays. So maybe you could get the Blue Jays at really low ownership and hope that they get into the Rays bullpen a little bit. But not really a spot that I'm targeting all that much. Snell, we have to be off him because of the pitch restriction. Something else that I think we have to talk about here is that starting for the Blue Jays, Thomas Hatch is min price on DraftKings. He's projected for 20% ownership. So it's pretty significant. It's a starting pitcher at min price. You can't really go wrong with that, because he puts up like 6 or 7 fantasy points as a starting pitcher at min price, and that's decent output. The thing is that Thomas Hatch might be really bad. He didn't pitch well in Double A last year. He's a non-prospect. ERA right around 4 across Double A and Triple A last season. So I think he's fine if you need to save salary, but definitely not a priority play. And if you're looking for a little bit of leverage with Thomas Hatch coming in at 20% projected ownership, I don't think the Rays make for an awful stack because they have a decent offense.
All right, and chat having some fun at my expense, as is warranted here. Yeah, well, now you know what I was doing most of this morning, getting our little technical advice. This is why we've got pairs on the show, because it helps out to have others.
And I couldn't do any of the tech stuff you did, because if you think it went poorly with you doing it, it would have been way worse if I was doing it. We would just be tweeting advice at each other on Twitter back and forth.
Yes. Well, and in that case, darn it. Okay, so no snow elevator. And this is something that's going to be interesting. A lot of this we don't know, because most of these guys in their the summer camp, the second round of spring training here, they only had 2 extended pitching experience incidences, and we saw with Scherzer. I mean, he gave up home runs to guys he had no business giving up home runs to. Wasn't hitting really much over 90 on the gun. He was just working some stuff out. Okay, he was just feeling good and looked totally fine going against the vaunted Yankees on opening day. We don't know where everybody is, and that's where I come back to I find it very hard to just marry into one pitcher in these. I got lucky with Bieber on FanDuel there on Friday, but then Clevenger, not so great yesterday, and I kind of went back to the well. We got to remember variance in baseball. We have had really no fantasy sports for about 3 months, and we're coming off basketball, which is much more predictable with a reasonable likelihood of things happening. This is baseball. It's craziness is going to happen. Now we've got people that are off, and we've got potential illness, not feeling good, positive test, negative test, all this other stuff. Let's be careful. We've got 65 days of baseball. Keep the powder dry. Don't lose it all in this first week, because we got basketball starting on Friday. All sorts of goodness. Thursday. I'm sorry. Thursday. Look at that. Yeah, it's all going to be coming fast and furious. So back to today's task at hand. Moving back here to our next one here. So Carlos Carrasco, an interesting pitcher. 8,600 is tempting on DK. He's kind of in my mix of players, but I'm not fired up for him. Because this is where, how far into the game is he going to go? We'd like to think, in that 80-ish pitch range, but the likelihood as we get into these rotations, that likelihood's decreasing a little bit with each day until we get back around to the aces. On the other side, you've got the Royals, who they're not a horrible lineup. They're not great. They're not the same Royals that we were seeing before.
They're pretty horrible.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Sal Powell batting cleanup? Okay, that's okay. But Alex Gordon, and then it falls off. Maikel Franco, we did this the other day. Wow, he's still in the league. Franchi Cordero, wow, he's still in the league. Brett Phillips, interesting. He's like a 9th outfielder on most teams. And then he got Eric Mejia. Okay, I'm confusing him with some backup catchers at this point. It falls off the shelf. What do you want to do in this situation where we have a proven commodity with Carlos Carrasco, but a guy that was coming off a recovery of cancer and some other stuff and a layoff? 60 pitches seems like a reasonable, hey, that was a successful outing for him. We don't know how long he's going to go. Do you want to earmark 8,600 on DraftKings for him?
Yeah, so here's the thing. We look at the projected ownership, highest projected pitcher on the slate in terms of ownership, almost 50% owned on DraftKings. So at that kind of ownership and with the potential upside, I think it's hard to stay away from him at 8,600 in cash games. In tournaments, though, I think there's plenty of reasons to go other places, just because the ownership's so high and there is that unknown factor where if he's going to be 50% owned and there is potentially only pitches 4 or 5 innings, we don't know. We've seen it with a lot of pitchers to open the season, and it's been tough to predict. Like Justin Verlander looked fairly decent his first start against the Mariners, only ended up throwing 73 pitches. Then the next slate, the Astros had Lance McCullers on the mound coming off Tommy John surgery. He threw over 90 pitches. So there's a lot of variance in projecting how deep pitchers are going to go into games, how many pitches they're going to throw. So in terms of all the uncertainty surrounding Carrasco, not to mention they didn't pitch all that well last year. He had a 5.29 ERA, 4.41 FIP. The strikeouts are still there. There's definitely upside, but I think there's enough question marks that at 50% ownership in GPPs, I'm looking to have him in my player pool, but be much lower than what the field is on him.
Yeah, and that is the way to approach it, and that's one of the things we do here at Awesemo. Is a lot of us have kind of emulated what Alex Baker, Awesemo himself, is doing, playing a lot more lineups, playing a lot of the slates, trying to through volume help turn a little bit of the variance into our favor. But that also means being smart with your bankroll, going down in the buy-in level so you can put the same amount in play, but play more lineups. And again, in baseball in particular, it's all about having one or two break free into that top percentile, and then the tournaments are so darn heavy anyway that you really need a top 10 finish to even really make much of a difference. And getting first, goodness, if you can manage to get first, hat tip to you. What I do to change this up a little bit is on FanDuel, I play a lot of lineups in those 100-mans. I'll do, they're 3-entry max, and they pay out top 12 reasonably. First is solid, and then caching is adequate. But what you can do is, because they're all the same, and if you go in all the same buy-in, you can play in a bunch of those, build your 25 or your 50 lineups, put them into that, and just don't worry about, oh, this lineup would have done X. You're going to have to beat way less people, get a much better return on your or much better bang for your buck. A lot of these contests, you beat out 90% of the people, 94% of the people, you're barely doubling your money. Okay,
Yeah,
would you rather get 9x if you get first, or would you rather barely double your money if you beat the unwashed masses?
Yeah, and the other thing too is, if you're looking to get into playing like mass entry and making multiple lineups, you don't want that much of an investment. I mean, there's 50-cent games on DraftKings, there's 10-cent games on DraftKings. FanDuel has the 25-cent entry that's 150 lineups, so that's what, $33 to enter 150 lineups. So there's ways that you could learn how to play mass entry without making really a massive investment that a lot of people think it to be.
Yeah, and that's definitely a more succinct way of putting it. Getting my sea legs here. Getting my sea legs. All right, back to the task at hand, because we got plenty of things going on here. Are there hitters that you like? I mean, when we look at Cleveland, they essentially have the top 5 guys. Top 4 are switch hitters, and that's the way it's going to be most of the season. Occasionally, they'll swap out Cesar Hernandez for other players, depending on if it's a righty or a lefty. And his strengths are a little more, even though he's a switch hitter, his strengths are a little more pronounced. But you've got, the best part is that covers your entire infield, and then you can cherry pick outfielders to your heart's content. Maybe you go cheap from some other teams, boost your pitching. Maybe you have a mid-tier or mid-price pitcher, and you have some, throw in the Mike Trout, the Christian Yelich, etc. That's definitely one thing that seems to be boosting at this point the Cleveland popularity. Nice matchup going against Ronald Boyanos. What do you want to do with Cleveland?
Yeah, I definitely don't think that Boyanos is any good. We don't have all that much data on him at the MLB level. Only made 5 outings last year, 5.95 ERA across the bullpen, and 3 starts also. His numbers in the minor leagues weren't any good either, so there's no reason to think that he's all of a sudden going to be way better in the major leagues than he was in the minor leagues. So it's a good spot for the Indians. They're not one of my favorite offenses, but I do think they're a team for fairly low ownership. Stacks projected to be 3% owned at Awesemo.com. So for that reason, I think that they're a decent team to stack with high upside at low ownership. I think had they played better the first couple days of the season, they would have had much higher ownership, because this was one of the chalkier offenses for the late slate yesterday, for the first main slate, and they just didn't do that much either of those days. So you just look at the recency bias from a lot of those people, and they're going to look and be like, hey, I rostered the Indians the first couple days and they sucked. I'm not going back to the well. And this is a good point to go to them again, because they're going to still be a good offense going forward. Just because they suck for you the first couple days doesn't mean they're going to suck for you every time you roster them this season.
Yes, most definitely on that. On to our next one here. Now gets a little interesting here. Spencer Turnbull, not so much, because Cincinnati, one of those teams that's really benefiting from having the designated hitter, because if they were trying to put Nick Castellanos in the lineup, not the best with the glove. They've got, of course, Joey Votto, who's 36 this season. He's an everyday player, but now maybe he gets a day off in the DH spot, since each team is only going to get 1 day off through this abbreviated season. Who knows what they're doing with Josh Van Meter, Jesse Winker, a couple other guys. It was Matt Davidson, not exactly the best glove guy either. He's going to be in the DH
Matt
spot.
Davidson, he just tested positive for COVID, so he's
Well,
He's away
cross
for a
him
little
off.
while.
Yeah, he's going to be out. But we've got them going against Spencer Turnbull. We have Trevor Bauer, who definitely was getting his workouts on Twitter, at least doing battle against a few
Everybody?
other. Yeah, well, I guess the world. What are we doing here? 10,100 for Bauer. He runs his mouth. Where's he running the pitch count to? That's the most important thing today. Do you think we get 80 to 90 pitches from him?
Yeah, I mean, he's always been a guy who kind of has a rubber arm that's been a super workhorse. Like we've never really seen him get injured unless it's, a drone related incident. The one thing that's really interesting to me with Bauer is that it doesn't seem like people are scared off by his bad season last year. Like last year was somebody going into the year, I thought Bauer was a Cy Young candidate. He was one of the pitchers I was super bullish on heading into the year, and it did not turn out that way at all. He had a 4.48 ERA. The strikeout rate went down a little bit. The walk rate went up. He gave up a lot more fly balls, more home run to fly ball rate. So the increased walks with the bump in home runs, that was just all a recipe for disaster. Burned out in Cleveland, ended up getting traded to Cincinnati. And it looks like based on the projected ownership, people are expecting a bounce back from Bauer because he's projected to be 46.7% owned on DraftKings. That's the second highest projected ownership behind any pitcher behind Carlos Carrasco. So I certainly think for cash games, Bauer's somebody you want to have in there just because it's a plus matchup against the Tigers. And also the strikeout rate is there. So there's potential for upside. I'm just a little wary of him at that much ownership because he didn't pitch well last year and he got blown up a lot. So if we look at the projection for him to be a top 2% pitcher at 26% compared to the nearly 50% ownership projection, I think that he's somebody else to be underweight to in GPPs. I wouldn't totally fade him, but I think that having him, if you're playing multiple lineups, playing him like 25% of lineups makes sense when he's going to be 50% owned because there's a chance that he doesn't pitch all that well just based on what we saw from him last year. He gave up a lot of runs and a lot of easy matchups. There's also some times where he's going to pitch gems, but it's hard to predict that on a day-to-day basis from a guy like Bauer. He's a really high variance pitcher. So when somebody is that high variance is 50% owned, I'm fine with being underweight to the field on him.
All right, so we got a lot of news here. I'm going to circle back here on the Marlins. I have just now gone in and set all my lineups. Players starting 2 o'clock or later. I'm not even going to worry about trying to make lineups at this point because this show is way more crucial than me mucking around with that. So this is courtesy of the Awesemo premium chat here. We've got a few people chasing this one down. We have our friend of the show, and now he's got a live blog and doing some other stuff for us. El Negro Loco, also known as the News God, and he definitely is on top of this stuff. So here's some items. Dumpster Fire in chat's talking about this as well. So this is from John Heyman, who's a baseball reporter. He says, "I've heard that Jose Urena plus 2 starting position players have tested positive. Florida is a hot spot right now. Can't say this is that shocking." And then we have another baseball reporter, Craig Mish, saying, "I'm going to have to use caution with this, but my sources indicate that there are some COVID-related issues with the Marlins right now. It's unclear who, what, or how many, but things are developing. Would not surprise me if we see a couple other guys flip-flop in that starting lineup." That is going to, and again, they're in Philadelphia, but remember they were in Florida for the abbreviated training and all of that. This only is going to help Vince Velazquez there,
unless the game's at risk of being canceled. that wouldn't help him. Is that? I'm gonna look up Heyman's tweet. Has that been something that's been mentioned?
I didn't go that deep. I was just cherry picking there from the top.
All right, I'm gonna pull it up on Twitter.
So yeah, so while you're looking up that's just something that everybody that we want to think about and set up our next game here, because hey, we're going back to Boston. We're going with the Red Sox here. They have been, I don't know if you can say disappointing for a team that put up 13 runs on Friday, but they had 8 extra base hits. They were all doubles. That doesn't really help us. And then the bottom 2 or 3 guys in the order accounted for 4 of those doubles on Friday, and a chunk of the runs and RBI. That's not what we were expecting. Kevin Pillar got a couple, and it wasn't with the general stalwart. So while people are saying, "Oh, that feels a little bit disappointing," that's not what I wanted to see. It's really not what I was expecting. it's still not a bad outcome. We're still talking about Baltimore. The pitching not great. Yesterday it was Alex Cobb somehow cobbled together a handful of innings, and then a couple relievers came in and sort of cleaned things up. And all of a sudden now you're looking at what, two hits amongst the top four in the order over the last 2 days for Boston. I'm going off memory here, but I believe it's Marcell Ozuna, I think, had both of them. I think the top three guys in the order each day were 0 for. That's going to turn around. We still have Baltimore. We still have a Baltimore bullpen, even with 30 players available. That's not a good thing for Baltimore. So I think we want to go back to Boston here. The one guy I want to call out, Michael Chavis, batting down there in eighth. He's 2,900 on DK. He can do a lot of freeing up of your allocated salary at either first or second base. Don't worry that he's batting at the bottom of the order. Everybody gets a shot here at Baltimore. What do you want to do with Boston? Are you willing to go right back to them and hope they right themselves?
So, I mean, they have the highest projected run total on the slate. They're going to be the highest owned team for the third straight day. It's funny, for a team that got so much negative press after trading Mookie Betts in the offseason, nobody seems to care because they're the highest owned offense on every single slate so far. That's going to be the case again today. It's a good spot for them. I'm going to have exposure. The only thing is, I mean, at 20% projected ownership is, am I going to have over under the field to Boston stacks? And I'm probably going to be slightly under. They're still going to be one of my higher owned stacks. I think they're worth exposure to. If we're pointing out some individual players, you mentioned Michael Chavis. I think he's a good way to differentiate stacks. Another guy that's a good way to differentiate stacks is, I think, Rafael Devers at 5,200. It's a left-on-left matchup against Wade LeBlanc, but still, Wade LeBlanc is terrible. He's probably going to be out of the game fairly early. So even though Devers is going to face LeBlanc for his first, maybe second plate appearance, there's going to be a righty in the game sooner rather than later because Boston's probably going to get into the Baltimore bullpen. So if you're looking to differentiate stacks, I think you could throw Devers in there. He makes sense. Jose Peraza leading off, 2,700 on DraftKings, 2,600 on FanDuel. He's per dollar to me the top play in the Boston offense. That's just way too cheap for a guy who's leading off in this favorable of a spot. So great spot for Boston. Load up on them in cash games. In GPP, it's hard to be way over the field when they're going to be 20% owned as a stack. But still, I think it's worth being around that number, about equal to the field, maybe a little under. But still, they're on paper, this should be the highest scoring team of the day.
Absolutely. So just breaking down Wade LeBlanc just a little further. Over the last 2 seasons, he was a Seattle Mariner. He was pitching in the mostly AL West friendlier ballparks, plus T-Mobile Park is one of the better pitching parks. He averaged 1.65 home runs per 9 in that stretch as a Mariner.
And some of it was out of the bullpen, where you would figure he'd be better out of the bullpen than as a starter.
Right. So 52 home runs in that stretch. That's the 11th most of anybody with at least 200 innings pitched over the last 2 years. 1.57 to righties, 1.91 to lefties. There's your Rafael Devers. A little nudge for him again. And we got JD Martinez, Bogarts, Vasquez, Chavez, Pilar. They all have 200 plus isolated powers against lefties over the last 2 seasons. This is a phenomenal spot. Don't talk yourself out of going to Boston. On the other side here, we've got some cheapies depending on your side of choice. DraftKings says, hey, Austin Hayes, 4,300. Wow. But he's also one of the best plays over there on SuperDraft, sponsor of the show here. He is a 2 multiplier there. He is leading off, and he's going against Ryan Weber. Do you like the batters of Birdland here, Greg?
I don't think that they're a bad contrarian option. Let's see, what are they projected at? Baltimore, only 2% projected ownership as a team, as top stack percentage, projected to be the top stack 5% of the time. So it definitely makes sense for this to be a team that you're overweight on in terms of stacking. They're worth exposure to. The other thing, too, is there are a handful of good expensive pitchers on the slate to pay up for. And the Orioles are so cheap as an offense that we could pretty easily get 2 aces in with an Orioles stack. And even though on paper they don't have a good team, Ryan Weber isn't any good as a starting pitcher. The Red Sox don't have a good bullpen. We saw the Orioles score 7 runs yesterday and produce some good fantasy results. So it's definitely well within the realm of possibility that they score, 7-8 runs, end up winning this game, and, turn really good value. They don't have to do all that much to pay off those price tags.
All right, let's keep on going here. Yes, you are hearing my dog bark in the background, perhaps. My wife made some delicious desserts, and friends are coming over to pick them up. So There we are. Moving on to our 2 o'clock games here. We have UC Kikuchi, the lefty, going against Zach Greinke, the righty. The Houston Astros are once again squarely in play. They have 5.7 implied run total. Mariners 3.4. Little notation here on Kikuchi. He allowed 36 home runs last year in his major league debut season. Now, he'd been a successful pitcher in Japan. He's definitely worthy of being in a major league rotation, but those 36 home runs, that was the fourth most on the season, and he didn't even, quote, qualify with enough innings to really count as part of that. And the 4 players above him had more home runs in 30 innings to 60 innings more pitched than he did.
It's pretty funny to think the reason why. He was so bad. He gave up so many home runs that he had to come out of games early and didn't qualify to give up to be a home run leader because he gave up so many in short innings. So, yeah, the Houston Astros is a stack. They make sense. They're also not one of my favorite stacks on the slate. They have projected 5% to be the top stack on Awesemo.com, 8% projected ownership. So they're fine, but for the lofty price tags that a lot of their big bats have, it's just hard to really fit them together to make what I consider to be like an optimal lineup for this slate. So they're fine, they're viable. It's just not a priority for me the way this slate fits together.
All right. Let's talk about likes. Get us up over 100 likes here. We've got almost 1,200 people watching. That is an amazing number here. We just crossed over 1,200. Thank you, everybody. Applause and kudos to all of you. That is one of our most watched weekend shows. We're glad to have a captive audience. We're glad we're having you guys all tune in. But give us a few likes. Promise you, if we get up over 200 likes, the technical issues will be gone for next weekend. So there we go. As I just blow the mic by laughing, but there we are. Yes, all of you, go ahead and make funny comments about my laugh. It is a funny laugh. Heading on to the rest of our 2 o'clock games here. Kenta Myada, now with the Minnesota Twins, will be taking on the Chicago White Sox. It's 93 degrees in Chicago right now. We have let's call it a crosswind, 12 to 15 miles an hour from first base to third base. As I mentioned, 93 degrees up there in Guaranteed Rate Field, 55% humidity, reasonable hitting weather there. Maeda, it'll be interesting to see what happens now that he's not in Dodger Stadium. Not exactly a true pitcher's park per se, but much better than Guaranteed Rate. And now he's got to face a DH every single day. So you've got Maeda at 9,000. I don't really know what to do with him. Ronaldo Lopez, all the talent in the world. Does he put it together? Does he not? We never know. Is he more Dylan Covey than Lucas Giolito? I think he's got a little more Lucas Giolito in him, but the consistency is not quite there yet. He is among the home run leaders over the last 2 seasons as well. Is this a batter-only game, or are you willing to roll the dice on some of these pitchers just to buy some pitch count?
Yeah, so here's the thing. I think in the past, there's been times where Ronaldo Lopez made sense as an SP2 just because he has such good stuff and he has the potential to strike out hitters and he has good games from time to time. But he's 8,100 on DraftKings today. So that takes him out of consideration as an SP2 for me. It's a really tough matchup against Minnesota, so I'm off him. As for Kenta Myada starting with the Twins, I like Myada. I think he's a good pitcher. The problem is just that he didn't always work deep into games during his time with the Dodgers. And now on a new team, tough matchup because I think the White Sox are going to have a good offense this year. At 9,000, there's just other guys I'd rather pay up for. So I'm off both the pitchers in this game. As for hitters, I don't really want to stack against Maeda, but just because we've seen Ronaldo Lopez get blown up so many times in the past, I think the Twins make for a viable stack. And the field seems to agree because 15% projected ownership for Twin stacks today. That is one of the highest projected teams on the slate. That's actually behind Boston, second highest ownership for any stack. So Twins are viable. I don't like them as much as the field. Definitely no pitchers for me in this game.
All right. And then if you're using an optimizer to make stacks, especially the Twin stacks on DraftKings, keep an eye who you're getting into your lineup. You will get a 4-man stack. And if you have great pitchers in those stacks, it's probably because you're getting Jake Cave, Luis Arias, Marwin Gonzalez, and Alex Avila. So just be careful what you wish for. You ask the genie, you get what you ask for. Is it what you wanted, though? I don't know. So just watch out for that one. And keep in mind, Twins, major league record, 307 home runs last year. So very impressive. And they added Josh Donaldson to the mix. So, hey, why not? Continuing along here, now we got a pitcher I like. Nope, it's not Mitch Keller, and you're going to hear me saying less than stellar things about the Pittsburgh pitching staff all season. They are without Jameson Taillon and Chris Archer for the whole season. So yikes! Musgrove. Yesterday was Trevor Williams. Today's Mitch Keller. I think we've got Steven Brault on deck somewhere in there. I don't like any of them. I am interested in Dakota Hudson. We are paying a premium. He does have a ton of ground ball potential. That should help mitigate the weather, which is definitely home run weather there in Busch Stadium, sitting next to the Mississippi, where it's 92 degrees and almost 60% humidity. I'm willing to somewhat trust Dakota Hudson. I'm hoping, since he's not really a strikeout guy, maybe he's one of those guys we can get through 6 innings. What are your thoughts there on Dakota Hudson? Because he's not cheap.
No, and so he's definitely going to be contrarian, but I just can't pay for somebody who only struck out 7.01 hitters per 9 innings and is priced all the way up at 9,300. When, Carlos Carrasco is $700 cheaper. We go $1,000 more expensive to get to Bauer. Guys like Kluber are on the slate. I can't trust Dakota Hudson, especially because his peripheral numbers were not particularly good last year. He had a 274 BABIP. The ground ball rate, like you said, was very high, but he gives up a ton of home runs though overall when the ball does go in the air, almost a 20% home run to fly ball rate. If the price was cheaper, I could get on board with Dakota Hudson. I don't remember him ever being nearly this expensive last year. So just with the dearth of other options on the slate, he's not somebody I really want to go to. So our first real disagreement of the day.
All right. And that's absolutely fair. If we look, let me see, where is it? Over his last, 92 plus. So over his last 200 innings, he has a 19% strikeout to righties. Okay, that's a little below league average. He has the soft contact rate is only 22%. Hard contact rate is 36%. But the best part, 64% ground balls to righties. I'm counting on some double plays, the pitcher's best friend, etc., etc. If we look at righties, now we get an uptick in home runs, 1.1. Per 9, 50% ground ball rate, so a little lower, but still in the elite aspect. But you're absolutely right. We look at that home run to fly balls. When the ball is in the air, it's got a heavy chance of going out. For lefties, that's almost 16% of the time. That's a lot. For righties, it is nearly 20% of the time. Potentially, we're playing with fire here, but I'm looking more for I'm going to believe in some ground balls, and I'm hoping the pitch count is going to be higher for him than some of the other guys. I don't want an implosion, but I am curbing my upside by going with Dakota Hudson. So that's just seeing both sides of the coin, and it's baseball. One of us could be right, one of us could be wrong. We both could be wrong. Who knows? We'll have to see what happens.
Could be somewhere in between.
Yes. So but these are the different ways to look at stuff. And with baseball, the variance, they always say, hey, you're going to win a third of your games no matter what. You're going to lose a third of your games no matter what. It's the other third. Yeah. Okay. Well, now we're down to 60 games this year, 65 games. That the variance is going to be off the charts. So just keep that in mind. If you were going to take any hitters from here, for me, I'd go back to the Redbirds, Goldie, DeJong, Carpenter. Is Yadier Molina going to literally play every day this year? Potentially. We'll see. But those would be the guys I'm looking at. Do you like any of the batters as we wrap this game up?
I don't mind some of the left-handed hitters from Pittsburgh. We've got the top of the order is going to be Adam Frazier, Brian Reynolds, Josh Bell, Colin Moran. They're all relatively cheap. They're all lefties against Dakota Hudson. Not priority plays for me, but if you wanted to go with a contrarian Pittsburgh stack, that's not a bad way to go. Then from the Cardinals, yeah, you could play some of those guys, but I don't really see a dying need to. Keller is a decent prospect, although he did certainly get blown up in some of his big league starts last year.
Yeah, it's going to be a strange one. All right, continuing along here. A couple more games before we leave DK behind, and then we'll do the two 4 o'clock games that are still there with FanDuel. If we look at our next one, this one's going to be fun. It is a Wrigley win game. It's not like the old school Wrigley win games. There, the new scoreboard, the adding of the seating around the buildings have changed the wind patterns somewhat there, but it is blowing out to center field at 14 degrees. That used to be an automatic, let's all go there. Now it's kind of like, well, it's a positive in the direction, but we need to really see things in the approaching 20 degrees or 20 miles per hour to get what it used to be when it was 10 or 15 blowing up. So it's entirely different now. Just be aware of that. That while the winds are strong, the balls don't carry as much because there's different patterns. That said, we still have a 12 over under in this game. It is 93 degrees. It is 55% humidity. All signs are pointing to this being a run-scoring game because Tyler Chatwood is on the mound, and then we've got Freddie Peralta as well. So absolutely, we're going to look at hitters on both sides. Greg's going to let you know what we like, but just know the slam dunk Wrigley win from DFS 2010, 11, 12, that doesn't really exist anymore. Just be careful.
No, but what is a slam dunk is that Tyler Chatwood is going to walk a lot of guys and put guys on base.
He's bringing Coors Field with him.
Yeah. I mean, last year we look at Tyler Chatwood walked 4.34 hitters per 9 innings. The year before, Tyler Chatwood pitched over 100 innings and walked 8.25 hitters per 9 innings. So we look at him against this Brewers offense. It is still a very offensive-friendly environment. The Brewers are my favorite stack on the slate. Tyler Chatwood got crushed by left-handed pitching last year. That's been the case for most of his career. He puts a lot of guys on base via walks when they aren't hitting him hard. And the pricing on the Brewers is pretty reasonable. Eric Sogard, 3,900 is a lefty leading off on DraftKings. The one thing that's a little annoying that isn't an issue on FanDuel, but is on DraftKings, that Justin Smoke and Logan Morrison, both first base eligible, but also both cheap, 3,700 and 3,400, both guys with home run upside. Overall, if you could only pay up for one guy on the slate, it would be Christian Yelich for me. He homered yesterday. He's going up against Tyler Chatwood. I think that he's the best pick to homer today. If I had to pick one guy to hit a homer, it would be Christian Yelich. I love the Brewers today. This is my favorite stack. I think the Cubs are viable also, but I don't like them nearly as much as the Brewers side of the game.
All right. And for those of you, he's still in the league, Logan Morrison batting fifth for the Brewers. Didn't see that one coming.
And he's almost min price on FanDuel. And the one thing Logan Morrison could do is hit home runs.
Yes.
He's going to strike out a lot, but he's going to hit home runs also. And that's kind of what I'm looking for in GPPs. So 2 years ago, he didn't really play last year, but 2 years ago, 15 home runs and limited at bats. So he was somebody who was on pace for about a 30 home run season. That's the one thing he's always going to be able to do. He's always going to be a power bat against bad right-handed pitching like Tyler Chatwood, who gets hit hard by left-handed bats. Logan Morrison's a cheap player who I would not be surprised to see hit a homer.
All right, moving along here, we're into our final game of the first 11. This is the last one on the DK slate. Then we'll move to the 2 4:00 games, which are on FanDuel. And then, of course, we'll wrap this all the way up. But we wanted to try our best to get through these before lock. Keep an eye, as we mentioned before, on shifting lineups. The COVID testing coming in for some of the teams, so we could see some swaps. Just be careful there. And then pitch counts, yes. Definitely keep an eye on that as news continues to come out. As we mentioned at the top, we saw Justin Verlander look really good, not have to throw so many pitches. Got the night off early because they were just owning the Mariners. On the other side, we saw what looked like what was going to be a strong outing from Scherzer, even after he came off a rocky performance where he was just working some stuff out in his last practice start there. So we're all over the board here, but thankfully we've got Greg here, who has been on top of all the news while your old pal has been trying to take care of the tech. But I promise.
And my new pal.
Yeah, but your new pal. Yes, the training wheels are coming off here. We're going to be good. Hit that like button. That inspires us and, of course, makes our analysis that much better. The Rockies in Texas. As a reminder, Texas has a new ballpark. This one has a roof. So just keep an eye to see if it's going to be open or closed. That is going to dramatically change things. Once again, this is no longer the, hey, it's almost 100 in Texas, it's going to be 115 on the field, let's have some fun. They now have the ability to put the roof over that. It'll still be warm, etc. And even with what we've seen in Arizona, those first days, if they haven't front loaded when they're putting on the roof, it still takes time to cool things off. It's not that beastly hot, but it's not exactly a delicious 73 like a lot of other covered stadiums may be. So keep that in mind. We have Corey Kluber going today. That's a very we're paying a top price, but we know that Colorado not as great on the road. No surprise there. That's nothing shocking. Looking at the bottom part of their lineup, even with the DH, you've got Ryan McMahon. Okay, he's all right. And then we've got Ramiel Tapia, Sam Hilliard, and Tony Walters. Those are the guys that the optimizer is going to put into your lineup when you ask for 4 Rockies. Just be careful. They're not exactly the Rockies that you want. Do you want to go to Kluber is the first question we have. Is he one of the guys on your short list here? Because we're on our last DK game.
Yeah. So actually, I like Kluber quite a bit here. He sucked. He sucked last year. The season ended in, a way that isn't going to impact him long term. He got hit by a line drive, broke his arm. So this isn't like some sort of, shoulder or elbow injury where I expect him to impact his performance going forward. He didn't pitch well last year, but we only saw him make a few starts. So it's hard to really know what to make of it. And one thing we've talked about pitch count so far, he threw almost 100 pitches in his last summer league game. So Kluber's somebody who I think is going to be stretched out. We saw Lance Lynn go pretty much a regular start in his first outing. We saw Mike Minor go regular start his first outing. So as far as Rangers pitchers go, this is the one team that I think that we could just say like, hey, their starting pitchers are going the regular 100 plus pitches. So Kluber, I think we're going to see normal workload. It's a really favorable matchup against the Rockies. The Rockies had a 74 WRC plus on the road last year. They were one of the worst teams in baseball against right-handed pitching last year. So there's a little bit of variance with Corey Kluber, but for a little bit of different reasons than we saw with some of the other pitchers, just because with other pitchers, we don't know what their workload is going to be. With Corey Kluber, I'm pretty confident in the workload, but he may have regressed a little bit last year. His velocity was down a little bit before getting hurt. But just based on the ownership here, projected 10% ownership for Corey Kluber. Compare that to Trevor Bauer at 50%, Carlos Carrasco at 50%, Zach Greinke at 25%. I think Kluber has just as much upside as these guys. So in tournaments, I think that he makes for a really good pivot play. Is that something you're on board with, or are you wary of what Kluber did last year?
I think it's reasonable. He wasn't the Klubot last year, we had seen so much in the past. And the other thing that's tiny bit concerning, it's like, Cleveland sort of, yes, they have, Bieber and Clevenger coming up and Carrasco recovering there from stuff, but to give up on Bauer and Kluber or ship them out, however those things played out, a little bit nervous. Bauer, a little bit of a head case, that makes sense, but Kluber was, he was good. So is there anything underlying that we need to concern about? I don't know. And we won't know until we see more pitching. But I believe the analysis getting there, talking about the trends that we've seen with the Texas pitchers and just the matchup, the roof likely being closed today. I think those all line up to a place where I'd be willing to take a chance. Plus, with some of our Sunday lineups, we're getting some guys on. FanDuel's got a bunch of people under 2,500 that are viable. DraftKings has several under 3,500 that are absolutely viable. So when you get two of those guys in your lineup, a Vince Vasquez on your secondary pitcher, all of a sudden you can spend on that top pitcher. And I think Kluber is one of the guys. Definitely he has more upside than my Dakota Hudson recommendation for sure. But what are we getting? We don't know. We just don't know. So you get mitigate what our expectations are and understand those things. Couple things in chat. Want to shout out Achi Blue says that you're doing a great job, Greg, and EMac. Not too shabby. So what? Just because I don't have blue eyes, that's why I'm getting discriminated against. And then Robert Kahn said 72 degrees in Texas in the stadium yesterday. Absolutely. To clarify, what I wanted to say is, if we don't know if it's open or closed, and it's been open for a couple days, if they haven't shut it and given their HVAC time to do it, and remember, baseball stadiums do the darndest things, because Miami is a convertible roof and they still had a rain out. Just be careful and just know that it may not be 100% what we're thinking. I'm just saying, let's look as much information as we possibly can have. They don't open and close it, etc. But just know that, if it's been open for 4 or 5 days and now they're closing it, when did they close it? Are they cranking the AC? What's going on? Because we've seen weirdness, going back to basketball stadiums, hockey ice, condensation coming up through the basketball floors. We've seen, we've done this and forgot to do that. We left the sprinklers on. Every year at least once there's a game on somewhere where sprinklers pop up in the outfield when they're either going through batting practice or sometimes during the game. Weirdness happens. Just know that that's yet another variable out. All right. Now we are on to our 2 games here that are FanDuel only for the main slate. We've got Arizona at San Diego. Garrett Richards resurfaced here going against Zach. I can't remember if it's Galen or Gallon.
Gallon.
I wanted to say Galen, and I was just like, nope. I know there's a reason that I need to slow myself down. Guys I like in this one, Cole Calhoun cheap home run upside. You've got David Peralta. I always love him in lefty-righty matchups. And Garrett Richards is a talented pitcher, just not able to stay healthy, similar to Matt Shoemaker and some of those other Angels pitchers that are now elsewhere. So I haven't given this one a ton of thought because I'm just playing on DK today. But I do like the lefties going against Richards. And what do you like in this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a relatively nondescript game. The Diamondbacks have a 3.8 implied run total, 4.2 for the Padres. There's a ton of spots that are supposed to be really high scoring today. At 6,400 on Garrett Richards, if this was later in the season and I'd seen him pitch a couple times and felt comfortable about his workload and what he looked like, then I think 6,400 would be a great price tag on him. Just there's been so many injuries, it's been so much time off for him that I can't trust him until I see him make a start or two and kind of see what his workload looks like. What does the stuff look like? What does the velocity look like? By all indications, it was good in summer camp. So I'm not going to look to target against him, but I don't trust him enough to roster either.
All right. SuperDraft sponsored the show. Do want to remind you guys that right now we have 5 minutes left. Their contests are about a third vacant. So they do have late swap, and we do have a whole chunk of games, particularly that Boston one that goes off at 1:35. So if you wanted to quickly put some placeholder lineups, picking players in that game and later, you can circle back and take care of your lineups. As I mentioned earlier, I've already done that with my lineups. There will be no lineup building on this show. We're focusing on the show, but I'm okay with that because that 1:35 start for Boston is I'm not going to miss out on the teams I really wanted to go after. So do keep that in mind. If you haven't signed up yet, promo code Awesemo10. That's Awesemo10. Your first deposit of $10 will get you a $10 match. If you put in $100, use that same promo code Awesemo10. They'll give you 20 on top of that. All right, let's see. We are. Oh, the Angels game is only a 4:00 game. Well, that's kind of sad because we have Shohei Ohtani, who is going to be pitching today.
Yeah, well, I'm thrilled that we don't have to deal with him on DraftKings again. So this is probably for the best. This is a FanDuel only game because the Ohtani situation has been a bit of a mess.
Yeah, absolutely. Now he is going to pitch Sundays. They have said that's what they'd like to do. May or may not pitch hit the day before or after. They said we're going to play that one by ear, depending on how he's feeling. But because you're using entirely different muscle groups and all that stuff, and they've waited so long, and he's dealt with so many other injuries, they said, look, we want to give him a shot as a pitcher this year. We need him in the field, or we need his bat in the lineup because things go south after Mike Trout. So they're going to do their best to make sure they maximize whatever he's doing. Problem is if they start to fall out of the chase here, he will get more days off before and after that pitching aspect because they just want to see what they have. And he's been phenomenal. We've already seen it before. Are you ready to go with him as a pitcher today on FanDuel?
Yeah, he's my favorite pitcher on FanDuel. For the price at 8,000, it's been so long since we've seen him pitch, and he's been such a good hitter that it's easy to forget that when he first came to the MLB to play in the States, he was billed as an ace pitcher who might be able to hit. And now he's hit so well that I kind of think it's gone overlooked how good of a pitcher he was. And not only was he a guy who had an ERA in the low threes, good peripheral numbers, struck out nearly 11 hitters per 9 innings. And if we look at him in terms of summer camp and what the team is saying about him, he's not going to have any restrictions to start the season. He's expected to get a full workload. I don't think that means he's going to throw 110 pitches in 7 innings or anything like that. But I also think it means that he's going to pitch, 5 or 6 innings. He's going to have the strikeout upside. And I think this is a really good chance to kind of buy low on Shohei Ohtani, as much as we could buy low on him, because I find it very unlikely he's ever going to be $8,000 on FanDuel pitching, maybe for like 10 years or something like that, because I think he's a stud. And also, with this game locking so late, I think that he could go overlooked in tournaments. I think that people are just going to kind of not roster some of the players in these later games. And Ohtani at 8,000, that's the best value to me at pitcher on FanDuel.
Yeah, absolutely. And hitters going against him, I'm not feeling that good about it. It's just
not at all.
There's really no point. We're going to be playing Oakland a lot. Hey, really liked them the last 2 days. But there's just spots where you're just going to wave them off. They still strike out a fair amount, and they're on base, not always the best. We like them for their power upside, and that's kind of going to be lacking there against Ohtani here. On the other side, we've got Mike Fiers taking the mound here. I had a fun little a fun little note that I looked up last night. Do I still? Oh, I closed my article, so I'm going off the top of my head. But I believe over the last 20 years there have been 85 no hitters. Two of them have been by Mike Fiers.
Oh well, I don't think he's gonna have a no hitter today.
There are 300 in baseball history, 303. He has two of them. He has almost 1% of all the no hitters. He's also one of those guys who's been in the top 10 home runs allowed over the last 2 seasons. Bit of a dichotomy there. What do you want to do with Fiers?
I don't want to roster Fiers, but I'm also not really willing to stack against him just because he does give up the home runs. So you could use maybe like Trout as a one-off or something like that. But there generally isn't that many guys on base when he gives up the homers because he's always been a low BABIP guy. He's low ground ball, high fly ball pitcher. So look at him last year, 254 BABIP, the year before 269 BABIP. You could get solo home runs. It's just hard for me to think that an Angel stack is going to be able to compete against some of the other high-powered stacks that are earlier on in the slate. So you could use Trout as a one-off. I mean, Trout's always viable, but I prefer Yelich at the same price range.
All right. Let's see. We got a minute left by the time you hear this. SuperDraft still has about 20% in their contests, so definitely check that out. We'll talk about the afternoon games. I know some people are scrambling here. Again, late swap over there on SuperDraft is nice, and you don't even really have to have an optimizer if you want to do it. You can just download the CSV file. This is what I was doing yesterday because I entered a bunch because there was some overlay, and I just wanted to go in and see what I did. So all I had to do was just copy the name of the player ID that I wanted in the column I wanted in. As long as I kept the player that was locked in the right column, it uploaded just fine. So I was only changing about 10 lineups, but you drop 10 into their $3 or their $1 or whatever. It's easy to go back and fix it with their flexibility on that. So that was just the way that I did that myself. Let's see, moving along here. Let me go back to my the Oakland lineup is in now. Well, they're giving us a Sunday lineup. Robbie Grossman batting 6. Vimal Amashin, I'm not aware of him, but he is batting 7th and playing shortstop. You've got Sean Murphy catching, batting 8th, and Tony Kemp batting 9th. Wow. It falls off rather rapidly there.
More reason to like Ohtani.
Yeah, absolutely. And see if you can find that on single game action as well. So here's let's see, so Mike Fiers was allowing 0.13 home run per 9 to lefties. He's got a 40% fly ball and hard hit rate. Same-handed hitters, he's got a 182 home run per 9, 41% fly ball percentage, 38 hard hit. So hello, Mike Trout. Not that we need a reason to play him, but hey, there's your reason to play him. As we head on to our late slate here, we'll go back to a bit of a leisurely pace because everybody's dealing with block right now and all of that fun. So let me go set my filters for our later contest. So we've got so we've got the 7 o'clock game here. Sean Newcomb going against Rick Porcello, rounding out my hey, guess how many home runs this guy gave up over the last 2 years is going to be Rick Porcello. He allowed 58 over the last 2 seasons, which is the 9th most. And I say here, and I'll drop this article in chat, but I say that continues our theme of the day. At best, he is an innings eater who will take the ball every 5 days and save the bullpen. Now, even though we have expanded rosters at this point, every couple of weeks they're shaving off a little bit of where they are, and they're going to get down to 26 guys. Normally we have 25, and they're going to go to 26, I think is if I'm remembering correctly, the various versions I've seen. So regardless, they still aren't going to want to burn bullpen out because there's going to be plenty of other people that need to do it. And it's not like some of these guys in the Boston or the Mets bullpen are better than Porcello. The thing that shocked me, do you remember how many seasons Porcello played for the Mets or the Boston off the top of your head?
He actually went to high school near me. That's kind of beside the point, but some of my friends played against him in high school baseball. Let me think. 5?
It is 5. I thought 3 for some reason. I was looking, I'm like, wow, 5. Because I wanted to make a joke about him winning the Cy Young Award, which he never should have.
He's easily the worst Cy Young pitcher in baseball history, right? Like that's it, because not only was that 1 year a total outlier compared with the rest of his career, like he hasn't had an ERA. Like his ERA has almost been 5 since winning the Cy Young.
Yep.
But it's also, he shouldn't have won it that year, and he's just been terrible ever since. So it's just such a poorly aged award.
Yeah, and so the year before, nobody was a 20-game winner. The year after, nobody was a 20-game winner. But everybody's like, oh, well, he won 22 games. Why? 3 people had 22 or had 20 wins that year. I want to say Keuchel or McCullers was one of them, and then there was somebody else. So, even if you go back and look at his numbers, they weren't great. Last year, he had like a 5.6 ERA. Hey, he's also a World Series ring winner because he got that with Boston as well. Here's what he's done the last 2 years. So this is a little pitch. I don't do a lot into the pitch mixes and that stuff, but for him, I did. So I said last year against righties on his 2-seam fastball, which he threw 20% of the time, he allowed a 380 expected isolated power against his 4-seam, which he used 40% of the time. So 60% of the time, these two pitches, he had an expected 188 isolated power. So that, if you average those two out, that's well over a 200 expected isolated power to righties. Against lefties, it was a 232 on his 4-seamer, which he threw 41% of the time, and on his 2-seam fastball. So he basically reversed with the way they spin, how they did. It went that route, but he had 15% of the time 186 expected isolated power. So that is the way to go. So I said, despite going a combined 1 for 23 on the season, Ronald Acuna, Ozzie Albies, and Freddie Freeman, let's look to them once more.
And you know what else the Mets have behind Porcello? A really bad bullpen.
Yes.
And the only thing that's normal in 2020 is that the Mets bullpen blows games, because that happened yesterday. And the other thing is they did make some additions to bullpen. They added Dylan Patantis, who's coming off a torn Achilles. So, who knows what he's going to be like going forward. I still think that it's a good addition for the upside, but still they've burned their bullpen because they went to extra inning games yesterday. They had to use their bullpen on opening day also because DeGrom was on a bit of a pitch count. So the Mets have an already not great bullpen that's depleted. So this is a pretty good spot for the Braves. I'm actually pretty surprised this game is set at pick'em odds because I consider Newcomb to be a better pitcher than Porcello. I think the Braves have a better offense than the Mets, and I think the Braves also have a better bullpen than the Mets. So I think the line's a little off here, and I prefer the Braves side of the game.
Yeah. All right, final game of the night. For those of you still sticking around, appreciate it. We're going to be on. We've got wall-to-wall shows. We've got NBA coming up. Of course, we have MMA content, PGA. We've got NHL right around the corner here as well. Everything is going into full swing. Plus, we've got season-long NFL. So you definitely want to check that out here. Several good promo codes out there. I dropped the link to my article in the chat. That's the free Spotlight Hitters and Stacks article. It's got all the promo codes for SuperDraft. It's got all the Awesemo promo codes in there in the top third of the article. Check that out. It'll be up every day the night before the games, and it is a fun read. Last game of the night, we have the Yankees and Nationals wrapping up our opening weekend, much like we started it off on Thursday. You've got Jonathan Losiaga going against Pat Corbin. Yeah, yep. I'm kind of glad we don't have to worry about this one because I don't know what to do. A lot of scary hitters.
Yeah, we did this a little out of order because.
Oh, did I?
We already talked about the Yankees.
Sorry.
It's actually, in fact, the game's already started.
All right. Well, let's go with the real last game of the night. As you can tell, my soda's almost gone. Let's go with the real last game of the night. San Francisco at the Los Angeles Dodgers. Still don't know for sure who's pitching for the Giants, and then we have Julio Urias going for the Dodgers. Do they take the pitch count, the pitch cap off of Urias today? Do we get to see 70-75 pitches? Yeah,
I mean, I'm not sure, but compared to the other options on the late slate, he's still pretty clearly the top option per dollar. Like I don't like Porcello. I don't really trust Newcomb. We don't know who's starting for the Giants, so just based on what's available to us, I mean, you kind of land on Urias by process of elimination because the Giants are going to have one of the worst offense in baseball. The Dodgers are prohibitive favorites, so there's a good chance for him to pick up the win if he does make it through 5 innings. So I almost think it doesn't matter if he goes 4 or 5 innings, or even if he goes, if he only gets 10 outs, because it still makes him a better option, I think, than what's available. Does that make sense to you?
It does. It absolutely does. Speaking of long outings, feels like I've just played a doubleheader. It's been a challenge. I'm looking at my lineups, just making sure. Yes, I did in fact hit save. I've got all my my players starting at 135 or after. Now I'm going to go differentiate so I don't run a lot of trains. But thank you, Greg, for making your debut here with us. It has been an absolute pleasure. Where can people follow you on social media?
Yeah, on Twitter at Ehrenberg DFS. And guys, EMac, incredible job, because people don't realize the amount of hats he's wearing. It's not only the hats that are over his left shoulder in the picture. He's producing the show. He's doing all the tech. He's doing everything. So before we got on, he's panicking. He doesn't know how to get the show on YouTube, and he's convinced he could do it all himself. But so we'll get better as we go. But it was good meeting you, and there'll be many more shows to come.
Excellent. All right. Well, you guys can follow me at EMacDFS. And of course, it is Awesemo_COM over there on Twitter. With that, gamers, good luck.